Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week, we are continuing our trek through chapters 44 through 51, ending part 3 of The Way of Kings. We will be talking about Kaladin and his flashback chapters in this episode. If you want to hear about our thoughts on the Shallan chapter specifically, that is last week's episode, so you can go check that one out. But this week is all about Kaladin. Eliot, talk to me about your 2 words for Kaladin.
So my 2 words for this series of chapters were betrayal and honor.
Betrayal and honor. Paul, talk to me.
All right, for my 2 words, I went with 1 word. I felt that the word that best described these chapters altogether is selfless.
Selfless. Good. I understand why you say that. Let's discuss these. Alrighty. Selfless. Talk to me about selfless, Paul.
So, for a few reasons, and for very different reasons, I would say, starting all the Kaladin stuff, we see almost like a Hunger Games scenario where Kaladin's brother Tien is effectively drafted into the military.
Mm-hmm.
And what does Kaladin do? He can't let that happen. Just whatever he has made his mind up that he's going to become a surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, he is volunteering in Tien's place to join the military. And he actually doesn't take his place. There's the whole thing there, not very fun. So they both go. But that was a very selfless thing of him to do. As well as later on, I don't actually want to bring it up yet, but Kaladin earns quite a prize, I will say, and ends up giving it away and not even being concerned. And that was an incredibly selfless thing to do.
We will certainly be talking about that later. Don't you worry.
Yeah, it's just a casual prize,
Yeah, just a kingdom on the floor. Doesn't want to pick it up.
Yeah, no big deal.
Eliot, talk to me about your 2 words.
So mine are pretty related, actually, despite them sounding rather different. Betrayal and honor. Way back in part 1, the part 1 section of Way of Kings, my theme, or what we talked about a lot coming out of that, was honor. And I felt like some of these chapters kind of harkened back to that and brought up some of the same discussions of what it is honorable. And then we see an example in Amaram of him coming across as honorable first, and then having a pretty big betrayal moment where he proves himself not to be as honorable as we thought he was. But then there's some other hints of honor as well. I thought of honor when Kaladin had his Hunger Games moment, as you call it, Paul, and volunteered or tried to volunteer to take Tien's point. That's the first time I think we've seen Kaladin step up, young Kaladin, and do something honorable. He's kind of been processing and thinking a lot of these thoughts as a young boy, but this is the first like him really stepping up and being a man moment. And I thought that was very honorable of him, even though honor is maybe not something I would attribute to maybe someone of his age. But I thought about it there. And then briefly, we got a glimpse of Adolin. He had a little cameo in this section where he does something rather honorable. So there was kind of a theme running through these ones of honor, culminating in, of course, betrayal.
So I want to talk about honor before we move on completely from it. So we end with chapter 51, and the next we see Kaladin in a timeline is back in chapter 2. Chapter 2, it is 8 months since this battle that is going on in chapter 51 and chapter 47. And it's 8 months later, and the title of the chapter in chapter 2 is Honor is Dead. And that is when Kaladin is in the slave wagon, and he's being all moody in front of all the slaves, and now
Dejected.
we understand why. So, honor is a good word for this. All right, let's talk about the Hunger Games moment, as you guys have coined it. Chapter 44. It starts off with Kaladin and Tien laying on the roof in the rain, in the weeping. And Eliot, you have on the outline the weeping, and you were wondering what that was. Has it mentioned that before, and we just didn't know what it was yet?
Yeah, there's been more than one reference to the weeping, and just from context, it was pretty clear that weepings were referred to basically as years.
Okay.
They'd mentioned like a child only at their fourth weeping or something like that. So that kind of statement where you can pretty clearly assume it's an event or some kind of marking of time. Up until now, though, I had no clue really what that was, and I was really curious what this event was that they marked their time by, and we get a very clear description of it here in this chapter, of the weeping being this constant rainstorm that comes at a very set time each year, but it's not like a high storm, and that it's this hurricane level mow your house down kind of storm. It's more of a light, just kind of drizzly rain, basically, for an extended period of time. Which Kaladin
Correct.
actually has an interesting chapter where he's kind of comparing the two of them and how he likes the high storm for its energy and its get stuff done sort of thing, and he doesn't like the weeping because he gets depressed. I think during the weepings, the weeping brings along that, overcast skies, brings out the depression in him. But
Yep,
the weeping, now we know what it is.
for sure. And there's a nice moment between Tien and Kaladin and his family, which, if you think back to it, this is the last time that Kaladin's family is all together. Kaladin, Tien, his mom, and his dad are all end up all on top of the roof here, and they're all just laying on their backs talking about life. And little do they know, in an hour, Tien and Kaladin will be split. And it's just a nice, like, it warms my heart to think that Kaladin is laying on the roof all depressed and being a little dramatic, and Tien walks up there and does the same thing, and he has this line where he squints his eyes. He's like, it's kind of hard to look straight up into the rain, Kaladin. What are you doing? And Kaladin laughs at him, and then his family joins him, and then Amaram walks into their lives and messes things up. Well, it's not really Amaram's fault at this point. It's more Rashon's fault. But Tien gets drafted into the army at Rashon's request. And there's this whole technicality of how Kaladin can't be put into the army because he's going to be the surgeon's apprentice, and he's independent of such a calling. And then,
he's too important. Yeah, vital.
Correct. And then, but Tien isn't, and so Rashon puts Tien's name down to spite Kaladin's family, and then Kaladin ends up going with Tien to make sure he doesn't die. So there's a double meaning to the weeping, I suppose.
Didn't even think of that, but that's pretty. It really is the weeping,
Which, if you think about it, yeah, that this event probably makes the weeping even more significant or dark for Kaladin, because now going forward, that probably reminds him of this event every time it comes around.
Yep. Tien was always there to cheer him up during the weepings, and he is no longer.
Yep. I love that you point out the family moment that they had before that, because that's another thing where reading it the first time, you don't realize that's what that is. That's their last moment as a family, and it is a heartwarming thing. But then when you read it back the second time, you realize, oh, this is it. This is the last little family moment that they have. So it means a lot more the second time around.
Yeah, for sure. It'll highlight this later, but Kaladin does have a good supporting family structure. Whether his mind lets him think that or not, his family is very supportive of him, and even even if Liren is disappointed that Kaladin is joining the army, he understands that he needs to be there to protect Tien, so he lets him go.
Well, and contrast that to Shallan, where we don't really know what her history is, but clearly something is very wrong with her family. And
Right.
we've at least I've kind of assumed that a lot of that probably keys into a lot of the struggles that she's having, and the darkness that we've kind of seen in her seems to be stemming from the troubles in her family. And I think you're absolutely right. Kaladin's family is not perfect. It doesn't have, everything lined up, but Kaladin did have a really good family.
All right, let's talk about Rashon and Amaram together. So Rashon, I believe, is Amaram's cousin. I think we find that out in chapter 51. Kaladin mentions that, and Amaram doesn't remember Tien. But Amaram shows up to look for volunteers and doesn't find any, so Rashon just gives him a list of boys to call on, and they're required to go. And up until this point, Kaladin's family thought they were going to win. They, with the whole conflict with Rashon, they thought they were going to. Kaladin was going to go off to Kharbranth. They were going to be fine. Tien was going to be a carpenter's apprentice, and it was all going to work out. And then all of a sudden, the entire thing's ripped in two. And Amaram's kind of at the heart of that, even if he doesn't intend for that to happen in that way, because as far as we know at this point, Amaram is an honorable general. He just needs men for the army. That's completely understandable. And Kaladin may put some of the blame on Amaram because he's in this situation, even if Amaram's not really to blame.
In this situation specifically, it's Rashon, right? Rashon is the one who's been mad at Kaladin's whole family, and that this isn't just a coincidence that Tien was called. But yeah, like you said, we don't really think anything about Amaram yet as being bad. We're like, oh my goodness, why did Rashon have to do that? That was the lowest blow, worst thing he could have done. And it's very sad. Hence the weeping, right?
Right.
But at this point, at least, all of my disdain is towards Rashon and not Amaram. Yeah, he's just, they need more men. Understandable,
Not yet, at least. Maybe in a few chapters.
Yeah, as of right now, understandable. He's just the recruiter guy,
I think I'd go even further. When I read this chapter, I mean, when you see Amaram standing there compared next to Rashon, Amaram seems positively honorable. I immediately put him up there in the class with Dalinar and Adolin. This seems like to be, Rashon is kind of the one-off dirty bag, Lighteyes guy. Here comes, an actual Lighteyes who does have honor, and he even almost tries to point out, oh, cousin, you're kind of being petty here. Do we not have to do this? And Rashon, no, absolutely, you have to take him. And Amaram, reassures Liren and says, don't worry, I'll take care of him, kind of thing. Like, I like this guy right off the bat. I definitely am thinking, oh, okay, I can get behind this guy. This is going in a direction I like. Little did I know.
The entire concept of Lighteyes, as far as Kaladin's concerned, at this point in chapter 44, is Amaram. Amram is what Roshon should be. He is the honorable Lighteyes. He shows up with all the pomp and demands the respect that Roshon should. And
Exactly.
this is what the Lighteyes are supposed to be. This is Dalinar. This is Adolin. And turns out later, no. But because at this point Kaladin has been presented with so many Lighteyes that have let him down, the fact that Amram at the end of this at the end of part 3 will be like not only let him down but quite literally backstab him answers the questions on why Kaladin hates all Lighteyes. He refuses to believe anymore that there are good Lighteyes in the world after this.
As far as we know, like at this point, he hasn't. Does he know other Lighteyes at all? Like he knows Roshon, and he definitely doesn't like Roshon. And he knows Amaram, and he definitely doesn't like Amaram after a while.
He knows Laurel,
And
but
so-
Laurel's also turned her back on him.
True. That's more of a heartbreak thing, and not necessarily malicious.
Sure.
But definitely not a good experience that he looks back on fondly. So we get a lot more perspective as to why Kaladin can't stand Lighteyes, which I think is really important. So I guess you could say that Kaladin's chapters may have done more, or may have served more as a world building tool than Shallan's chapters
Last
for
week's
a
Shallan
change.
chapters, yes.
Yes, yeah.
As far as this episode, yeah, I think you're right.
It's true. We do learn about the Weepings. We learn more about Lighteyes and Darkeyes, and yeah, okay, I'll give you that.
I was definitely waiting for the other shoe to drop as far as Kaladin's view of Lighteyes, because current day Kaladin, it's very clear. He hates Lighteyes with a passion. There's even a segment in one of these chapters where Syl even says, "You're not you around Lighteyes." It's like a different Kaladin, which I noticed and thought that seemed very telling. But the past Kaladin, we've only slowly seen him kind of build up this resentment for Lighteyes, and even up till the very last chapter, even up until Tien's already dead, he still seems to be holding on to this thread of Lighteyes are still okay. He even thinks, part of why he rushes in the battle to go defend Amram is because he thinks that Amram is someone worth defending. And so I'm reading these thinking something is still has to happen that breaks this for Kaladin. Something still has to occur that is going to cause Kaladin to have this permanent scar. And lo and behold, it comes right at the end of part 3.
So I guess on these earlier Kaladin chapters, we get kind of the background, the little history about Kaladin and why he kind of works the way he works almost. And then we get quite the amount of major events happening too, which we'll get to, and I'm really excited to get to those.
Which one? Dive on in.
I mean, most notably, we find out that Kaladin kills Shardbearer,
Yes, he does.
and that was pretty awesome. And that was part of why my word was selfless, was he kills a Shardbearer and then just like doesn't take the shard blade or plate. He's like, I'll just pass on that. Like I couldn't. I was sitting there just like, please, like Kaladin, just take it. Like, come on. And he doesn't. And then a whole lot of stuff happens. But I guess what I want to know, especially Elliot, like what your initial thought was with that whole
Oh yeah,
scenario, because that was just enormous.
it really was. And I felt you described it so perfectly right there. Of he's just killed the Shardbearer. Epic, another epic battle scene. He takes down the Shardbearer, and the Shard blade is laying there on the ground, and I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, take it. Like, come on, Kaladin, just do it. You can bring honor to that shard blade. But we all know very well that he didn't, because modern Kaladin does not have a shard blade, but you still just want him so bad to pick up that shard blade. It's like, come on. And he doesn't do it. But I I was both surprised and not surprised by this whole chapter with him taking down the shard bear, because this is actually sort of kind of something I predicted beforehand.
It is.
And I honestly don't quite know how I picked up on this earlier on. I can't point you to anything, you know, concrete in the chapters we read before about why I thought this was coming, but I felt very sure that he was going to take down a shard bearer, and sure enough, he does. My theory though was that he was then going to be denied by the Lighteyes, the shard blade, which is not what happens. Amaram is standing there telling him to take the blade, and
Correct.
Kaladin doesn't do it. So it's not the Lighteyes that deny him the blade. It's Kaladin himself who denies him the blade. And that was this was another pivotal moment. We've had a lot of pivotal moments in the last few chapters, but this was another one of Kaladin basically looking at that blade and seeing everything that he hates about Lighteyes in it, and just not being able to bring himself to pick up that blade and take on, at least I think that's the way he feels about it, of joining them almost. He can't do it. And
Hmm.
that's an interesting character point for him.
Yeah, he's at least he practices what he preaches, right?
Yeah.
He refuses to turn into all of these light eyes that he despises, to the point where he will not take the shard blade because it will quite literally turn his eyes light. And he is so prejudiced against all light eyes to the point where he refuses to do it because he's afraid of becoming one of them.
I'm learning that Kaladin is a very all or nothing kind of guy, and he lives that in all the moments that we see him. He is all in or not at all, and I think that's just who he is.
Yeah, he's when he's about to grab the shard blade, and Amaram is telling him to take it, and then fast forward to 51, where he again asks Kaladin, "Why aren't you taking the shard blade?" And Kaladin can't really give him a straight answer because he doesn't really know why. He doesn't. I don't think he does give an answer, honestly.
No, he says exactly that. He says, well, he in his mind he's processing it as, I can't bring myself to join you, so I can't take it. But he
Right,
doesn't say that because he doesn't want to have to try and explain that to Amram. He just says, I can't tell you why.
right. And so Amaram interprets that as, I'm unsure as to why I don't want this, so I'm refusing it now, but I might change my mind later. And Amaram interprets that as, okay, I have to kill you now so that you don't come after me later because I'm taking this for myself, because I can't give it to your lowly spearman over there.
I guess maybe I was under the wrong impression. Elliot had mentioned that, that his theory that like maybe he killed a shard bear and it was denied by by Lighteyes in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever he just restated that just now, I thought, well, Kaladin did choose not to take it, but if he had, would he have been denied? Because as far as I remember, Amaram said, like I can't have, a bridge crewman like with the shard blade and plate, like it needs to be with someone who knows, who's been trained and knows what's going on. So I guess I was under the impression that if Kaladin did take it, they kind of would have like forced his hand, like forced it out of his hand even. But I guess
But
maybe I understood that incorrectly.
I don't know that you misunderstood anything there. I think my thought on that though would be, I don't know that they'd be able to. Like, they might want
Correct.
to. If Kaladin took that shard blade, they probably would want to say, "Oh, he's just a lowly squad leader. We can't let him have it." But at that point, what are they going to do about it? he's got a shard blade that he can summon anytime he wants. If they come after him, assuming they don't, kill him in his sleep or something like that, he's going to take him down because he's got a shard blade now, which is why I wanted him so badly to pick that thing up.
Right.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
Yeah, that is what it comes down to. Is Amaram's legs were like broke, like I think they were broken from laying under his horse. What's Amaram gonna do if Kaladin just grabs the shard blade right then? There's when he does kill the shard bearer, backing up a little bit, I love the descriptive passage of the actual battle between Kaladin and the shard bearer. There's one line where he swings his spear and the shard bearer cuts the tip off the spear, and Kaladin spins around and grabs the hilt of the spearhead and keeps spinning and slams it into the slit, the eye slit of the shard bearer, like all in one movement. So he like grabs it and keeps spinning. I could totally imagine that in a movie. Where
I can visualize the slow motion shot in a movie, clear as day. Yep. It is clear as day on the screen in front of me exactly how this plays out in a movie. It's very, very visually depicted.
Yeah, the tip of it gets cut off. He swings and grabs it and just wham, and then everything just freezes.
I can wholeheartedly agree. I can say that in these episodes, over these chapters, there's definitely been a lot of stuff that would make me really excited for a movie. Like the scene we described with Shallan and the symbol heads. Like that's something that I feel like I just have to see almost, like because that was just such a dramatic scene and there's so much imagery and so much stuff going on. That would make for a really incredible like movie clip.
I want to bunny trail on that for just a second. Trevor, you can cut me off in 60 seconds when I'm done, when I'm going too long on this. But at some point in the future, I do hope that we get a chance to do a movie episode. Maybe when we're done with this, Way of Kings, come back and talk about what a movie of this book would look like. But some of those thoughts as we're talking about some of these recent chapters we've read that are all really epic. As much as I can visualize all of these in a movie, I think this would be incredibly difficult because there's so many different types of scenes, and to depict them all together, the romance of Kabsal and Shallan, the politics, the history, the drama of the poisoning, then on top of all this action with flashback Kaladin and modern day Kaladin, that would be extremely challenging to cut into a cohesive movie.
So I'll limit myself here as well because we still got plenty to go. But
yeah, we gotta get back to the chapters.
I honestly, with our like definition of movie at the moment, I honestly don't think you can make a Way of Kings movie. There is too much that is all important, like all of it's important, and all of it builds on each other. That, I mean, it's a 900-page book, and of course you're gonna have to start cutting things out in a 2.5 hour, 3 hour movie, but you can't. Like, pretty much all of it you have to put in the movie for it to have the impact that you want at the end, which we'll get to. But like with our common concept of what a movie is and how movie arcs work and what would actually be entertaining, you can't make a 6-hour movie. Like it wouldn't work. You'd have to make a TV show. So
I agree, and then you could never fit the interludes into a movie, and that just kind of rules everything out for me.
So. Your favorite parts would be gone right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, tangent on movie there, but
that's okay. No. We certainly will do a dream movie episode later because I have plenty to talk about in a visual adaptation for The Way of Kings.
Definitely,
for sure. I have something that I want to circle back to right quick. Getting into these chapters is Trevor briefly mentioned we got a little reappearance from one of our Kaladin kids, and I thought that was really awesome.
Adolin?
Yes, we see Adolin, and I thought that was really awesome. I kind of like that was honestly. It wasn't the biggest event that happened, but it kind of gave me like a moment while listening to it. I was like, oh shoot, like I knew it was coming. Like it described like I don't remember the exact description, but I was like, oh, that's like got to be one of Dalinar's boys, like either Adolin or Renarin.
Right.
And I got really like super happy about that, and I thought that was awesome.
My favorite part about that scene is Adolin calls him Bridge Boy. Adolin is so arrogant and he's just casual about it that even if Kaladin isn't that young, he's 19, so that's decently young, but it's described Kaladin as, being able to grow facial hair and needs to shave, that type of thing. And Adolin just turns and sees Kaladin's the only person on the street left, and he's like, "Hey, Bridge Boy, come here." It's just such a good Adolin description, even though you're not from his perspective. It's Adolin.
You do see that, but I also liked how, I felt like Adolin. I mean, maybe I just have a really positive like view of Adolin and Renarin.
Mm-hmm.
But he seemed like cool with Kaladin. He didn't just like some bridge crew guy like let me mistreat him. He gave him more money than Kaladin almost knew what to do with. It was like I don't remember exactly. Was it an emerald?
I think it was an emerald
or whatever. It was, it was like a big one or whatever, and that meant a lot that means a lot to a bridgeman especially, and I thought that was awesome just to see him treating a bridge crew member nicely. Honestly, just a random bridge crew member, just on a casual interaction. So
I think it's less that he's giving him a lot of money because he cares about Kaladin, and that it's his pocket change. That two weeks of Kaladin's salary is he literally tosses it on the ground. He doesn't give it to him. He doesn't follow up with Kaladin later to make sure he did it. He just tosses it on the ground.
Yeah, this is the moment when I talked about before that Syl mentions that Kaladin is not himself around Lighteyes. I totally agree that there's not really anything in here that I think Adolin mistreats Kaladin. He's definitely looking down on him, but he's not being mean to him in any way. And yet Kaladin still takes it as, how dare that Lighteyes look down on me, and has this very adverse reaction to it anyway.
So this is actually one thing that made me honestly dislike Kaladin a little more. I mean, I understand his dislike for Lighteyes, and especially with Trevor mentioning that, I honestly didn't think about that as an indicator of how big a Lighteyes, or especially Adolin's pocket change would be. He just tosses this emerald brone. But Kaladin is very like kind of conniving and still just not. He doesn't have the option almost in his mind that there could ever be a better Lighteyes. And
sure.
And to be fair, if we didn't know Adolin, if this was some random Lighteyes, we probably would have thought less of him. But Adolin's a sweetheart, kind of, and or more so than a lot of the others. And so I honestly I didn't like lose respect for Kaladin, but I was a little like, come on, like, relax, take a deep breath, like, it's okay.
It's safe to say that he's prejudiced, and he doesn't hide it at all. He openly thinks that there are no good Lighteyes, and there will never ever be good Lighteyes. That's what he thinks.
Agree. Kaladin has a lot of very admirable traits, but this is not one of them.
Correct.
So if we're ready, I want to go back to the beginning of chapter 46, actually. That was the end of chapter 46.
Yep.
The beginning of chapter 46, I felt like a little bit of a detective, trying to piece together the path of my suspect. At the beginning of 46, Kaladin's, is he dreaming? Is that what's going on here?
He is dreaming.
He's dreaming. He's dreaming that he is a high storm, and he passes over the entirety of Roshar from end to end. And I'm loving the fact that I have my big old map with me. It was super handy as I was reading this chapter. I got up from where I was reading when I came across this, and I walked over to this wall, and I looked at my map, and I kind of traced Kaladin's path as he was passing over Roshar, because we get descriptions of a lot of these. Some places that we've seen and some places that we haven't seen. But it all leads up to an interesting moment. And I think it's probably important to figure out where Kaladin is, because it will tell us where Szeth is.
Where Szeth is, correct.
At the end of this sequence, Kaladin sees Szeth, Paul, your favorite white cloaked assassin, and it doesn't say it's Szeth, but it's obviously Szeth. And
I will spoil it for you. It's Szeth.
Yeah.
What? Spoiler alert.
But I immediately, as I'm reading this, thinking, oh, where is he? Where is he? Because where we left Szeth was at a pretty big cliffhanger, and I'm wondering where he's at. And so as I was piecing this out, I read through this section, and it started in, he's over the Shattered Plains. Kaladin sees the Shattered Plains. Then he moves over to Alethkar. Okay, we've seen Alethkar before. We know where that is. He then sees the Horneater Peaks, which was cool. We've heard reference of those, and they're on the map right behind me and right next to, in between Alethkar and Yakovet, if I remember right.
Correct.
I'll see if I can do it also without turning around and looking at my map. And then after that, he goes to Sigzil's land, which I think is Azir. I don't know that it said that specifically, but there was enough clues to piece that together. That's the kind of deserty section. If you have a map that you can pull up, I would highly recommend it. There's a deserty grayish.
I'll put it on the screen for him.
Yeah, oh, perfect. On the what would be the southwest side of Roshar that he passes over. Then he passes into a land that he describes as the people have faint blue veins, and that's all we get in that section. But my detective kicked in later on, because later in this chapter, when he's talking to Sigzil talks about these people who have blue veins, and he names that land as Babatharnum.
Babatharnum.
I was kind of dreading you putting that one in the spell check, because that was kind of a funny name.
I was fully prepared for that.
I just didn't think we had time for a spell check this week.
Yeah, we don't. Babatharnum. So that's right, just kind of to the north of Azir. So we've traveled all the way across Roshar, Azir, Babatharnum. Bear with me, we're almost there. The next land that we get to, we don't get a name for it, but he does mention that the people there are golden haired. If you go all the way back to the interlude chapter with Axes.
Can I interrupt here for a second?
Yes.
I'm very proud of you here. This is some deep dive stuff. This is good.
I told you, I felt like a detective as I'm piecing back. Oh, he was here, and then he was there. Oh, and then he was there. Axes is in Erie.
Yep.
Erie's the name of the country, right? I forget the name of
Erie.
the town that he's in, but Erie is like the northwestern corner of Roshar, back up here in the top, like up there.
North of Shinovar.
Yes, exactly. So I'm concluding, and Babatharnum is right, like just south of Erie. So it makes total sense. He went to Azir, traveled through Babatharnum into Erie, where the golden-haired people are, which Axes told us that the Erie have golden hair. This is where Kaladin runs into Szeth. And I know I'm talking for way too long here, but Szeth,
I'm enjoying it.
we don't know exactly where. We don't know exactly what he's doing, or he killed someone, because that's what he's been tasked with doing. So we don't know who he killed or why this is important. But all of this to say, I can conclude that Szeth is in Erie right now.
Can I get a round of applause for Eliot, please? Oh my goodness. I have to say I am thoroughly impressed. I'm glad Trevor briefly interrupted, and I'm very impressed. So I listened to this, and I did not come up with any of that. But wow, that's some good information, honestly, and the amount of references you're able to make there, and you even said the name of the place, right? Babatharnum, I believe.
Yep.
And everything. Wow, just nailing the head. Ooh,
I'm a
no
little proud of
telling,
myself for
right?
that one. And then my immediate thought on that though is, okay, if Zeth is in Erie, that's quite a ways from where we last saw him. Last we saw him, he was in, I don't remember what it's called, but it's close to Yakaved, isn't it?
Starts with a B. The Bavlands. It's south of Yakoved. It's like on the
Yeah,
mountains there.
yeah, yep. So that's a pretty far away place from Erie. So Zeth has traveled quite a ways, and I don't know that we have any clues as to like time scale of any of this. Maybe Zeth has had a lot of time to travel or whatnot, but Zeth's covering a lot of ground.
Yep. We're about to meet him again here in these next interludes, so he'll be somewhere else.
Ooh. So that was it. That was my massive theory paper on Zeth.
On where Zeth is.
Yes.
That's
Where
like
in the world is Zeth? Where in the world is Zeth's son Valino?
we made the connection before about like our predictions being like the board with all the strings everywhere,
red
and
strings, yeah.
I feel like that's how this was.
Yep.
But much more factual than just like guessing and making connections. So very impressed, and I always love finding out more about Zeth. And yeah, I'm extremely curious to know why he's out in Erie or what's going on there. I'm also super curious. I mean, kind of a side note on the golden haired. We've seen mention of that before, where their hair is like actually gold, like golden,
Yeah.
and it's like kind of a valuable thing, at least somewhat.
Yeah.
And we've seen mention of that, and that it's like not just blonde, but like literally golden. And I think that's really cool. And I'm curious to see more about that. Maybe we'll run into Axes again at some point.
The only place, well, one of the only places that Kaladin didn't mention seeing was the Pure Lake, which is where Ishik is. So sorry, Paul, we haven't seen Ishik yet again.
I was thinking about that too. I was gonna say brief mention, especially because next week we're looking into interludes, and I cannot wait. I was actually gonna bring up Ishik for a second. Ishik and Axes, if I remember correctly, are like the two interlude characters that we've seen that were kind of dropped in and don't like Numbalot, for example, we know is part of Shalon's family, so we know where that correlation is, and Zeth has been relatively reoccurring. I'm unsure off the top of my head.
Yes, I think there might be one more that we haven't seen. We haven't had a repeat of, but yes, you're right.
We had that one from Risen, but
That's who
that
it
one
is.
tied into the Zeth storyline fairly well, because
Sure.
we learned some history about the Shinovar and the Shin and Zeth in that. So that was a bit tied in. So I'm with you, Paul. Axes and yeah, was definitely and Ishik are the very out of place ones that we can't really place much yet.
And from what I've learned is that they're not just gonna be like one-time mention. They've got to come back, right? They've got to have some at least mention, or at least of that place. And so I'm curious to see how they get intertwined somehow, some way. So I'm excited to see about that. All that to say, Kaladin saw Zeth.
Yes,
yeah,
Kaladin saw Zeth in a dream, and it hinted that Zeth saw Kaladin.
Mm-hmm.
Zeth looked straight at him and kind of waved, actually, and then Kaladin woke up.
Which I gotta say, that could be some serious foreshadowing for your biggest theory right now, Paul, about a Kaladin and Zeth meeting or an intersection of their storylines. This could definitely be a little hinting at that.
How do they see each other if Kaladin's just dreaming?
I am super glad that you mentioned that, Elliot. I was just about to say that kind of plays into, or maybe hints at, there may be some kind of greater thing going on here, and that in some way they'll meet. I guess just a reminder, my current prediction on that is that Zeth is going to in some way have to assassinate or run into Kaladin, and then Kaladin is going to something will happen, and this could be that event, perhaps like, oh, I've seen you in this dream, like I know something's up, kind of thing. And then I think that Kaladin is going to help Zeth get freed from his Oathstone, or at least take control and be like, well, you're like set free effectively. But either way, I'm really hoping for a Zeth Kaladin meetup in some way. And this was kind of that tidbit, that like glimmer of hope that, oh, that might be right. Like, please. And I'm really hopeful with that.
I will note that Kaladin isn't important enough to get assassinated yet, but that might change if people figure out he's surge binding. There are, however, other people on the Shattered Plains that are important enough to get assassinated. So, like Elokar, so they might run into each other even if they're not looking for each other.
Exactly. And how do you take down a Surge Binder? With a more experienced Surge Binder, right? So,
wouldn't that mean Zeth would beat Kaladin?
Yes, but
Oh,
like
I forgot you're cheering for Zeth. I forgot you're on the Zeth train.
I am on Team Zeth if we have to pick one. But I was saying that would be a way that they, maybe they get intertwined somehow. Kaladin's got plot armor. He won't die. So not too worried about that.
I mean, Zeth's got a shard blade, so that's certainly got to give him a bit of an advantage. But Kaladin has taken down a shard bearer before, so who's to say he couldn't do it again?
True.
A very good point.
They're kind of pushing us along through 46. There are 3 kind of offhand comments that nothing kind of comes of them in 46, but I do want to highlight them to make sure you guys caught them. Sigzil is a world singer, as Rock puts it.
Yeah.
And I don't think they define it, but Sigzil is not happy that they figured out that he's a world singer. And it kind of just ends there. So remember that.
Can I say a thought on that real quick?
Sure.
I noted that for sure as well. And I think Rock describes it a little bit as someone who travels the world telling stories of other places. I kind of got the impression to, help people understand about other lands. It sounded like a very positive thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like, oh, he's a world singer. Like, oh, okay, you're a traveling bard that goes around and educates other people. Great. But then Sigzil seems very defensive or embarrassed or not thrilled, like you said, that they have discovered that. So that doesn't seem to fit. I don't know. Some clues, but no answers there.
I also wanted to say something on that. I agree. I felt the exact same way. I was like, oh, world singer. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be a world singer. And he gets to tell about all these, like, mystical faraway places where all this other crazy stuff happens. And he's, like, really ashamed of that. And I don't know. I guess I'm gonna need another Shallan world building chapter to figure out why that is.
No, but we're into Kaladin world building chapters now. And Shallan action chapters.
True. We need another Kaladin world building chapter.
Yep, there you go.
And then we'll understand world singers. So.
All right.
What else did you have, Trevor?
The second one is this trial parshman that has joined Bridge 4, which is mentioned in 49, I believe. They name him Shen because he doesn't really speak, but they need a name for him, so they call him Shen. And he's kind of just there so far, and he hasn't really done anything, but he will later, so don't worry.
Yeah, what are I'm curious to know what Elliot's initial thoughts are about a parshman being added to the bridge crew.
I'm very much in the same mental processing space as some of the other bridgemen in the story. When they introduce him as, okay, this parshman is joining your bridge crew, my first thought, which they talk about, is how's that going to go down with the Parshendi? What are they going to do when they see a parshman charging at them carrying a bridge? What is the parshman going to do when he's charging into battle and sees the Parshendi on the other side? Is that gonna affect how they react to someone? Are they just gonna ignore each other? I don't know. And then I'm also asking about there's the new Bright Lord that's in charge of the bridge crews, although he seems to be a little bit of a pawn for his wife.
His wife. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who seems to really be the one running the show. And it's clear that she has very specifically placed this parchment in Bridge 4, which maybe that's an attempt to sabotage them, or maybe he's a spy for her. But I think Kaladin even thinks about this of, oh, he can't be a spy. Parchment don't process things on that level. There's no way he could do that. But in the back of my brain, I'm still thinking like, well, but maybe she's found a way to manipulate this guy or use him. He might not be intentionally spying on them, but she could be using him somehow to do that. I don't know. I don't distrust the parchment himself. I distrust why the bright lady, whatever her name is,
Brightness.
the brightness. There you go. That's the word. Has placed him there. I think she's trying to sabotage Kaladin, and it's not going to end well. That's my thoughts.
Interesting. I do agree. I don't think I actually have faith in the parchment. I don't necessarily think he's going to like sabotage a mission or anything like that, like a bridge run. But there's that like good chance still, I guess. It's like, what's gonna happen? Like, what is going on here?
Yep.
And definitely like, if there's a bridge crew to be sabotaged, it would be Kaladin.
It's going to be Bridge 4.
Right.
Yes. And so they made it seem like an experimental thing, almost like we're going to see if this works, so that maybe we could use Parchman almost.
It's not necessarily a malicious thing either, because if you take this to its logical conclusion, if Shen doesn't care about carrying bridges, then couldn't you just use Parchman for all bridge crews? And the Parshendi probably wouldn't shoot at them since they're Parchman. So that could logically save bridgemen lives. This isn't necessarily a malicious act from the Lighteyes. They're just throwing it on Bridge 4, see what happens.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Sure.
From what I know, I can't believe that will be all that happens. I'm sure there's got to be something, right? Or what I'm hoping for is that we're going to learn a lot about Parchman, and that Kaladin, kind of just through building rapport with his group like he's done in the past, maybe we'll learn a lot. Maybe Shen will start to talk, and maybe we can figure out some stuff. That's my hope.
That's exactly what I'm hoping happens as well, is that we can, by now getting to finally interact with a Parchman on a character-to-character level, we can learn more about them, and maybe by extension the Parshendi as well. Maybe we'll get some answers to some of our questions, although based on our experience so far, I have a feeling we've got more questions in our future than answers, because that's just been the way things have gone so far.
Yeah, perhaps. Well, and it might give you an answer to one question, but then in fight 10 more, so...
Exactly.
Yeah, in typical Way of Kings fashion, he'll be able to talk and explain, but not very well, and so it's just going to raise questions or something.
Right.
And the biggest plot twist of all, adding it to my prediction board somewhere way over here, the Parchman will have a shard blade.
Wow, that's quite the prediction.
Parchman, not the Parshendi? Just to clarify?
Shen will have a shard blade?
Yes.
Oh,
Shen.
wow.
Yeah, specifically. Yeah, that's not a very serious one, but if Shalon can have one, like,
it's fair.
So
why not?
So this is probably a good time, Trevor, actually, for a new theory that I have.
Sure.
Is, as I was reading this chapter, and actually some of the Shalon chapters that we talked about before, a new theory kind of sprouted into my brain, having to deal with the Parshendi, the Parchman, the Voidbringers, and the assassination of Gavilar. I'm fascinated by the Parshendi and why they're operating the way they are. The more we learn, the more confusing it gets. They don't seem to have a motive. It doesn't seem to make sense, anything that they're doing. They seem to have wanted to be sieged in the Shattered Plains, but they don't seem to be progressing the war towards any discernible goal. They assassinated Gavilar with no reason. All of that, I think, is leading me to think that the Parshendi are being used or manipulated by someone or something. I think something out there is manipulating them. And some more evidence I've seen for that. They seem to be very simple folk. We got a chapter before where they were kind of analyzing the Parshendi, and from the what they saw, it seemed like they don't fight like soldiers. They don't have the discipline and the tactics that an army does, like the Alethi army does. They
Right.
seem to be more like villagers who've been handed a weapon and told to go fight. They just happen to be very physically gifted. That's not really the right way to phrase that. They're physically superior to the Alethi. They're bigger, they're stronger, they can fight better. They have armor built into their skin, all that kind of stuff. So they stand up to the Alethi even though they're not disciplined. And yet they have these intricate weapons. We learn in the Shalon chapter that they have these like beautifully carved and engraved weapons. I wonder if someone has given them these weapons. Someone has come and said, "Oh, hey, all you villager farmer types, here's a bunch of weapons. Go murder this king and go fight all these people for some unknown reason." And I'm going to go even further with this. If you remember all the way back to, I get the prelude and the prologue confused. I think it's the prologue where Szeth.
The prologue is where's that? The prelude is 5,000 years ago.
Yes. Prologue. Szeth assassinates Gavilar. Gavilar gives Szeth an item, and it's a small orb that glows with what Szeth describes as a black light. It's almost like it glows with light, but it's darkness. It's not light. Given all that we've learned up until now, that seems to be describing a sphere, just like we've seen with the rest of it. But instead of imbued with Stormlight, it seems like it's been imbued with something else. And that something else, to me, maybe thinks I'm tying that somehow to the Voidbringers. They come from this other world. We've seen the Midnight Essence, which I'm kind of thinking is coming from the same world. They seem to have this darkness about them. I think that sphere came from the Voidbringers somehow. That darkness is tied to the Voidbringers. I think Gavilar got that sphere from the Parshendi. In the Shalon chapters, there's a lot of talk about how Gavilar was so fascinated by the Parshendi, it almost like he figured something out, but he didn't tell anyone about it, or no one really knows. I think he learned something about that sphere, about what it was, and I think it's tied to someone who is manipulating and using the Parshendi, and I think that someone or something might be Voidbringers. That's my long-winded theory.
Thoughts, Paul?
I don't know. My hat's off to Elliot this episode. Like,
I need one of those Sherlock Holmes hats. I feel like I've been Sherlock Holmes this whole episode of like picking up all the clues and tying them together. I'm going to turn into the crazy alien conspiracy theorist guy, him mixed with Sherlock Holmes. But yeah.
And in comparison, me and Trevor combined are Watson to Elliot's.
No, I'm the narrator. You're Watson. I know what's happening, and I get to talk about you two.
All right, I that's fair. But yes, I'm incredibly impressed with that. And honestly, I didn't remember about that. What you said, like the dark gemstone, and now I'm extremely interested in learning about that. Because there's got to be a purpose for that, right?
Yep.
Like that can't just be a casual like.
Oh, it was very clear in the prologue that was important somehow, and we haven't gotten any hints. I think Szeth may have actually mentioned it briefly.
Szeth talked about it once.
Yeah, in the interlude, he did mention it once or something like that. But aside from that, we've had no hint of what in the world that thing is. Actually, we probably have, Trevor. You know, probably there's hints all over the place. But as first-time readers haven't picked up on anything to hint at that. So I'm kind of going out on like 4 different limbs and then pulling them all together with this rather complex theory. But that's where I'm at.
And I think it is good timing that we saw in the Shalon chapters about this kind of like almost dark world that we've seen, and
Mhm.
kind of being confused about that, because that gemstone that you described does not seem to be like anything of the world as we know.
Exactly.
So
Right.
we need more Kaladin world building chapters again to clarify that. But this was one of them for sure. That's my mind has been open to a lot of new possibilities in the past
Right?
40 minutes or so. Wow.
All right, not to open another can of worms, but there's
Oh dear.
Go ahead.
one more
There's plenty of worms.
chapter 46 that I want you guys to note. Kaladin says one word to Syl, and Syl basically evaporates and runs to the hills. So he hears a name while he's in a dream and mentions it to Syl, and that name is Odium. And Syl hisses at him and runs away. Any thoughts?
Paul, I want your thoughts on this first. This time.
Can't we just stop having thoughts?
These have been some big chapters. The Shalon chapters that we talked about last episode, and now all these Kaladin, everything is changing and completely breaking apart a lot of the assumptions that we've had of the story until now. This has been a mind-bending, mind-blowing set of chapters for sure.
For sure. And so my actual thoughts about Odium here. I've said previously, this was going way back, like introducing Syl, introducing the little quirks she has about her personality. I've always thought that there's much more to Syl. There's got to be. She's not just a casual windspren. I mean, she can talk. She can, she has some memories. She knows things. And so there's got to be a lot more in her past that we don't know about. And no telling. I mean, she's a Spren as far as we know. So maybe that's back to like the beginning of time here, right? Like to whatever created Spren, like
Mm-hmm.
no telling if Odium could be the leader of the Voidbringers, or who created the Void. I don't know, some really dark, malicious being that we don't know about. Or honestly, I mean, they wouldn't actually do this, but it could be someone who, I don't know, said Syl was ugly or something. Like I could see her reacting the same way. But yeah, there's a lot with that, or a lot of possibility with that, and I don't know much about that right now.
Before you chime in, Elliot, I can tell you've got a thought or two about this. I just want to highlight Syl's reaction. This is not a Syl reaction. Whenever Kaladin asks Syl a question, Syl's like, "Oh, I don't know. I might have known it sometime, but I don't know." And maybe they talk about it for a little bit, but as soon as Kaladin mentions this name, she hisses at him and runs away. That's not normal.
And the Syl aspect of it is, I think, what scares me the most about it, because when we first see the name Odium is still in Kaladin's dream, where he's the storm, and or maybe he becomes himself again, and then he meets again this huge figure that we're assuming at this point is the Stormfather, and the Stormfather tells him, Odium comes, or something like that. That alone sounds pretty ominous, but when Syl has this reaction that she does to it, that makes me even more scared about what this is, just because of, like you're talking about, Paul, her connection to I'll call it the spiritual realm at this point, or this kind of unknown of what's going on. Clearly this has some kind of meaning for her, or maybe even a subconscious meaning for her that she's not even aware of. I don't know. I don't have enough to really formulate my thoughts on these yet, but Odium, I don't know. It's going to come later, and it's going to be bad, I think.
In all honesty, if I had to guess, I don't think we're gonna see any more about Odium for a long time,
Yeah, it could be.
or at least not anything really telling. Maybe it'll be mentioned, or maybe Syl will say it's something she doesn't like, but it sounds too big to be shown soon. But very interesting.
Indeed.
Alrighty. So, this has been part 3. Do we have any closing thoughts on part 3 of the Wave Kings as a whole?
So you know me, I have, as usual, a soapbox to stand on for my end of the part. So, Paul, I should probably let you talk and see if you have any thoughts on part 3 before I steal the mic.
No, for sure. I don't have anything super pressing. I'm super interested to see how storylines might begin to converge. I'm curious to see. I guess this is more looking into part 4, but I'm curious to see what's going on with Dalinar during this time and all the stuff there. Also, Elliot brought up a ton of things, and we talked a lot of things that I'm super curious about. One of which, if Yasna is even a real person anymore, and such. Like, I'm curious to see where it goes from here. We've gotten like one question answered, and we've opened 80 more. So
One thing that I will highlight real quick. I enjoyed your reaction to the very brief Kaladin Adolin interaction. That you were so excited for Kaladin and Adolin to finally like discuss, and then when they actually do start having conversations later, that's what you've been saying you've been looking forward to, is the storylines colliding. So
we're starting to see some of that happen. And Paul, like you said, the scope of the book has kind of been, here. If you're just listening to this and not seeing the video, you can't see where my hands are, but they're kind of somewhat close together here. The scope of the book has been not narrow, because the scope of this book has been pretty epic, but it's been narrow-ish. We just kind of open the floodgates, and the scope of this story has now gone out to here. My arms are now really wide for you audio listeners. The possibilities are now just endless of where this goes. Now there's all kinds of questions we're asking. Now there's all kinds of, where are we going to next? I feel like we've just expanded our horizons quite a bit. But I did have some common themes or one common theme that I thought summarized part 3 for me. And it was a little bit tough actually to formulate some of this, because if you look at the actual length of part 3 was a lot longer than parts 1 and parts 2. Parts 1 and parts 2 took us maybe like 3 or 4 episodes to get through the entire part each. It then took us like 8 episodes to get through part 3. Maybe not quite that much, but a lot more packed into this part 3, and a lot more of a journey that we've seen on our characters. But I think where I landed to sum up part 3 was the idea of hidden pasts. I'll say that again because it's hard to enunciate. Hidden pasts or secrets. We've learned that a lot of our characters have secrets buried in their past. We have Shalon, who's done something rather dark that she's very ashamed of in her past, and apparently has a shard blade, because there's that. And we know that even in her storyline, Yasna has actually had a few hints of stuff that might be a little bit hidden or dark about her past as well. There's obviously Capsule, who had quite a secret that he was hiding. We got his massive betrayal, so he had a very hidden identity, if you will. Then we jump over to the Kaladin chapter. Kaladin also had something in his past that he was hiding, maybe not quite as aggressively as Shalon or Capsule are, but we learn that Kaladin killed a shard bearer. What a huge event! But it's not even something that he talks about with anyone. It's something he almost doesn't even consider that as important in his history. It's just an aspect of him that he's kind of buried in his past. On top of that, we have all of the Bridgemen and all of their secrets in the past. We're getting more and more hints about Sigzil. Sigzil at first seemed to be just kind of another name in the crew of the Bridgemen. We're learning that he's starting to take more and more of a forward role as a character, and maybe there's a lot more to him than we think. We just learned that he's a world singer, and we don't know quite what the importance of that is. But another hidden past that he doesn't want to talk about. Teft. We actually didn't get to talk about this, but Teft has a hidden past that we learn about. There's a funny moment where Kaladin kind of tricks him into revealing that he's a soldier, that Teft was a soldier in his past. And so, again, another hidden past or another secret that's being withheld. And so, coming out of part 3, I'm guessing we're going to move on to some other maybe grander, more epic things in 4 and 5 as we close out this book. But the theme for me of 3 was all these people struggling with their pasts, their secrets that they're holding, and kind of the other characters starting to find out about those and starting to prod, and kind of interactions between characters of all these secrets that are starting to come to light. And again, I'm talking too long by myself on a concept, but that's my takeaway, I think, from this part 3, and I'm really excited to see where we're headed in part 4. Ultimately, after all of that, with all of those hidden pasts and secrets that have come to light, I feel like heading forward, it's Shallan who is the one that is going to immediately have to face her past. She's the one who's been revealed at this point. She's failed in stealing the Soulcaster. She looks like she's headed back to her homeland empty-handed, probably to face whatever dark secrets she has in her past. So not quite sure where Kaladin is headed, not quite sure where some of our other characters are headed yet, but it looks like, at least in Shallan's case, her hidden past has caught up with her.
Yeah. Do you guys have any quick predictions on where Shallan's going? We discussed a lot what just happened to Shallan last week, but do you have any predictions on what's about to happen in part 5 when we get there?
She's definitely going home, is my guess. She's going to go home, and everyone's going to be upset because they delayed for so long, and now the word is out, and they're going to be in a ton of trouble. So maybe she'll go home and then run away, or maybe she just won't go home and she'll just run away. But she's got to like run away, right? Kind of like, you know.
Does she have any chance with Yasna anymore?
Oh man,
is,
I'm
is
on the
Yasna
tip
is
of
Yasna
saying,
even there anymore? Was she ever there to
I'm
begin
on.
with?
Yeah, Yasna's not real. We're assuming Yasna's real, which is assuming a lot right now. So I my thought is no. She doesn't have a chance. That's been made clear.
It seems
But now,
obvious. It seems obvious that she can't have a chance with Yasna anymore. She has to be headed home. What options are left for her? But I feel like the lesson I've learned from last episode is we can't make a lot of the same assumptions that we've been making previously. And so I don't know that the obvious answer is the obvious answer anymore. Could all of this have been some elaborate test that Yasna has cooked up for her? Maybe. Is Yasna, even Yasna, like we're joking about? Who knows? I don't know where Shallan is headed. I feel like I just looking at the facts could tell you, but then I've learned, I think, not to necessarily trust the facts. So who knows?
she does have a shard blade, so maybe
Yeah.
she takes the soulcaster by force. Maybe she can't
Ooh.
bear to go home empty-handed at this point.
Just starts an all-out war with Luthala.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if the soulcaster ever went missing, it's basically what would happen at this point, as far as I know. So bring it. You know, you're in the headquarters already, so just pull out your shard blade. I don't know.
All right.
Work some magic.
I think we can wrap it up there. We've got interludes coming up next week, followed by part 4, and which is back to Dalinar and Kaladin. So be looking forward to that, and thank you for joining me, Elliot and Paul.
My pleasure as always.
Good stuff.